January 4, 1947. Positive ideas in the work. It was said recently that one should not do anything negatively. In this age it might be said that in the world people tend, as a whole, to do things negatively. For example, factory workers do not, and indeed cannot, take pleasure in their work, that is, the emotional part of moving center is not used, so they have to have music and so on as a substitute. The moving center works infinitely better when the emotional part collaborates. Then a person takes pleasure in his movements, in the skill of his hands, etc. And he becomes a craftsman through the guidance of the emotional part, that is, of emotional cognition. We spend a great deal of our time in being negative and doing things negatively without noticing it. The difference is between going to, or being dragged to, something. If you go to a thing from yourself, you work at it positively. Otherwise it works you, and that is one form of doing things negatively. One source of this is when we doubt. The work is always tempting us and so making us negative. Temptation is when we doubt the end. It is easy to give up, to think things useless, that is, to think negatively. One has to say to oneself, I can work, and say it further and further inside oneself. People do not recognize it as temptation. Here is an example in a letter on the subject. I have noticed that temptation can be met if it is recognized as temptation. I had an example last night. I was about to fall into a well-known slough of despond, doubting the end, and then it suddenly struck me that it might be temptation, and that perhaps it was not inevitable, and that perhaps one need not go into it, if one had some help. In the end I went to sleep quite peacefully. We must live with a plan, noticing ourselves in regard to it. If there is no aim, no plan, no individual direction, there is nothing to notice, nothing to work on. We remain where we were, for then we do not act consciously in our relation to our inner world and what we allow to go on in it, and in relation to the world of others who are mirrors to us. Self-remembering increases the force of consciousness. The act of self-remembering, as, for example, remembering distinctly one's plan, one's aim, in the midst of some difficult situation, actually creates new energy. It is like the light becoming much brighter, as if the central station had increased the current. And this is just what it is. We get connected up inside again, and the work then can give us force. Falling asleep, letting smoldering negative states grow unchecked, breaks up right connections. The whole plan and system of the work is simply to give right inner connections so that force from higher centers can be received. The act of self-remembering, in a full sense, includes all the work, all its teaching and new ways of thinking, all one has learned from it, all that one has gained from it, all that it means, all the insights, all the new experiences, all this together. Then right connections open up again and new force passes through one. What does this force do? It overcomes the negative mess of life, which people are always accumulating, which forms wrong connections. It increases consciousness, which is light. Through this light one sees everything more clearly, just as if you turn on the light in a room in which you have been blundering about and knocking everything down in the dark. Yes, self-remembering gives new light. This light is consciousness, increase of consciousness. The work is to increase consciousness. Now to have more consciousness requires our not going to sleep inside, for that is to invite and encourage darkness. Going to sleep means not doing anything in any of the three lines of work. You neither work on yourself and your personal ambitions and desires, nor with others, and on your mechanical contempts and dislikes of them, nor do you value the work itself and keep its ancient worth alive, between your two hands, as a delicate thing. Do you expect this ancient work to give you straightway the highest consciousness and understanding? That would be trivial, and would point to a tedious level of being. The work means work inner work, many inner and outer readjustments, many self-realizations and slow difficult periods during which you will work, as a small guarded plant, between your two hands, and keep your eyes on it enough. That means your attention, and the two hands mean inner and outer consciousness, consciousness of yourself and consciousness of others. This plant begins to die if you do not look at it enough. G compared it with an egg hatching out that you must not allow to get too cold. One ancient teaching says, not more than 8 hours. Well, it is something like that. For people who only think of this ancient work once every week at meetings, everything has to be taught again. They do nothing themselves in the first, second or third lines of work. They have no internal heat, no esoteric faith, only live faith. They expect to be warmed up by others. This is a poor state of being and understanding. What, said Mr. Ouspensky once, have you done since the last meeting? What have you seen? What have you understood? What have you noticed? Silence was the answer. Now we know that as long as a person is himself and delighted with himself, as long as he takes himself as himself and is satisfied, as long as he cannot by self-observation begin to separate himself from what he has up to, now taken as himself, he cannot change his being. He will be as he has been, that is, his being will remain the same. Now to change being, it is necessary to have positive ideas. Let us speak of this. It was once said by Mr. Ouspensky, the state of humanity can be compared with the following octave. Mr. Ouspensky said, mechanical man can be compared with the notes do, re, mi. He cannot get to the notes fa, sol, la, si, do. For what reason? Because mechanical humanity has not got positive ideas. Only positive ideas can make mankind pass the place of vacuum, of nothingness, the place where collectivism, crowds, medals, examinations are no good at all. What makes a man want to go on? He wants to rival someone else. Mechanical men cannot get beyond this, because life as third force cannot get them beyond this. You have to pass the place where life things are no good. Probably it is impossible on this planet for humanity to reach this stage. Only individuals may reach it. The work is a special forcing house to produce in people positive ideas without which they cannot pass from me to far. To change being, to grow, to fulfill oneself, a certain inner positive pressure of attention is necessary. One must have positive ideas. One must wish to change. This has two sides. One understands from the work that one's life on earth means that one has something quite definite to do or else one would not be here. That is a positive idea. The other side is that one finds in oneself many undesirable things that one is vaguely aware of and sometimes uncomfortable about. This side must become a positive idea and not a negative one. It is easy to find fault with oneself in a certain way. This is a negative idea. Through right self-observation one sees what one has to alter. Then the negative idea becomes a positive idea. No one can change through negative ideas through vague self-accusations, for example, or through a certain kind of miserableness. All this is negative. Do not listen to miserable I would love to drag you down. There is much in everyone, said G, that seeks to destroy him. Further, it must be understood that as long as a man thinks he can do, he is acting from a negative idea. His third force is life. Now it is necessary to wake up and feel the shock of the world teaching and see that the cause of all negative emotions and states is in you. It is useless to look at the outer cause of them. You must separate from them. And also recollect that negative states create only negative states in ourselves and in others. Try not to speak to people as if they could do, without seeing if you can do what you blame them for not doing. In that case, show them how to do it themselves. To be negative and blame another is to start from a negative idea. To see that one must work on oneself as regards negative emotion and stop identifying with it is a positive idea. Other people cannot do any more than you can. So try to stop speaking of them and criticizing them as if they could. Other people may be able to understand if you understand and can teach them from your own understanding. Do not live in a frozen world of thinking that others should be different. This is the ordinary life situation here. Accept your situation intelligently and remember others are mirrors of yourself. Do not think what you see in others cannot possibly be in you. God is what you need. Begin with your neighbor. He shows you what you need, that is, what you need to see in yourself and become conscious of. We all need to become more conscious. All work requires force. People have not enough force because they have not distinct positive ideas about the work and what they are doing and what it means in life. The more you feel the work, the more force of consciousness is possible for you, that is, consciousness above that required for serving life, serving nature. Everyone can become more conscious, that is, have more force. But this is only possible by following all this ancient work teaches. One must work for it, pay for it. If you prefer sleep, sleep. If you wish to awaken, work.